She had no family, no future, until the Mafia boss said, "Marry me and be mine forever." The cold in the apartment on 4th Street was a living thing. It seeped through the single pane of glass, slipped under the door, and waited for Savannah Costa in the thin blanket on her cot. She had been in Ravenport City for 6 months, and the city had already taken everything. She was used to a different kind of cold, the emotional frost of her Aunt Delia's mansion in the suburbs. That cold was about appearances, about control, about the suffocating expectation that she would be grateful for their charity. Savannah's parents had died when she was 8, leaving her a ward of her aunt, a woman who measured love in transactions. The final transaction had been an arranged engagement to a man 3 times her age, a political ally of her uncle's with hands that lingered and eyes that stripped her bare. Savannah had refused. Her aunt had called it ingratitude. Savannah had called it survival. The result was the same. She was cast out with a few $100s and a warning. Do not use the family name. Now, she was down to $42 and some change. The rent was $300. Due yesterday, the Cluck-and-Go diner, where she'd been slinging hash for 2 months, smelled of stale coffee and ammonia. It was a low-paying, grueling job, but it was hers, until today. "Come on, sweetheart, just a smile. It's not that hard." The man was in booth 4, a trucker with a gut and greasy hair. The waitress he was speaking to, Jenna, was 16 and looked at it, all sharp elbows and terrified eyes. A hand was on her hip, sliding steadily lower. "Sir, she asked you to take your hand off," Savannah said, her voice quiet but carrying in the midday lull. The trucker looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Mind your business." Red, Savannah planted herself between him and the girl. "She is my business, and this is your check." She slapped it on the table. "Pay up and get out." The manager, a weasel of a man named Sal, was on her in an instant. The trucker was shouting. Jenna was crying by the milkshake machine. "Savannah, my office. Now." Sal hadn't even waited for her to sit. "You know the rules. The customer is king." He was touching her. "Sal, she's a kid. And you're a problem. You've been a problem since you got here. Always with the mouth. I can't afford problems. Clock out. You're done." She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She just took her apron off, folded it neatly on his desk, and walked out. The $42 in her pocket suddenly felt like 42 stones. That night, the lock on her apartment door, a flimsy thing she'd been meaning to fix, gave way to the landlord's bulk. He didn't even look angry, just resigned. "I'm sorry. Savannah, I gave you 3 days. It's been a week." He pushed the door open, revealing her few belongings, a backpack, the cot, a hot plate, and gestured for her to take them. 10 minutes later, she was on the street. Her car, a 1998 sedan with a cracked windshield and a permanent scent of mildew, was parked 3 blocks away. She threw her backpack in the back seat, climbed into the driver's side, and locked the doors. The shame was a physical weight, pressing the air from her lungs. She was homeless. The word echoed, metallic and final. She drove until the gaslight came on, parking in a dark industrial block near the wharf, hoping the shadows would hide her. She cried for an hour, silent. Hot tears that did nothing to warm her. Eventually, exhaustion won. She woke a few hours later, throat parched, bladder aching. It was pitch black, maybe 3 in the morning. She'd have to find a gas station. She climbed out of the car, pulling her thin jacket tight. The air was damp and smelled of the river and rotting fish. She was cutting through an alley behind a row of nightclubs, a shortcut she'd learned. When the sounds reached her, a grunt. A wet, sickening thud. Savannah froze, pressing herself into the alcove of a boarded-up doorway. "You think you can steal from me?" a voice snarled. It was followed by another thud, this one heavy, final. "Please, I have it. I just need time." The second voice was choked with blood. "Time," the first voice mused, "is something you just ran out of." A beam of light from a flickering street lamp illuminated the scene. A man in a tailored suit was standing over another man, who was crumpled on the pavement. The man in the suit kicked the body, and it rolled, lifeless. Savannah's breath hitched. She knew that face. Everyone in Ravenport knew that face. Councilman Braze, the city's golden boy, the reformer, the man who was going to clean up the streets. He was wiping his hands on a silk handkerchief. "Clean this up," he snapped to someone just out of her sight, without thinking. Driven by some instinct she didn't know she possessed, Savannah pulled out her old cracked phone. Her hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped it. She fumbled with the screen, hitting the video record button. She held it up, peering through the small crack in the brickwork. She captured 5 seconds of Braze looking down at the body, his expression cold. Before he turned, the old phone made a soft, digital click as she tried to zoom. Braze's head snapped toward the sound. "Who's there?" Savannah didn't scream. She ran. She burst from the alley onto the cobblestone street, her worn sneakers slipping. "Get her!" Heavy footsteps pounded behind her. She didn't look back. She sprinted. Adrenaline like gasoline in her veins. She was a good runner, but they were men, and they were gaining. She vaulted a chain-link fence, the metal tearing at her jeans and slicing her palm. She ignored the pain. She was in another alley, this one a maze of dumpsters and stacked pallets. A hand grabbed the back of her jacket. She spun, driving her elbow backward with all her weight. She heard a crack and a howl of pain. She didn't stop. She dove into a mountain of trash bags by a loading dock, burrowing into the filth. She held her breath until her vision swam, tasting dust and spoiled food. The footsteps paused. Where'd she go? Check the street. She couldn't have gone far. The boss wants that phone. She waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. It felt like a lifetime. Finally, she crawled out, shaking, covered in coffee grounds and something wet. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, finally collapsing 3 miles away. Back at her car. She drove, not to her apartment, but to a 24-hour convenience store. She sat in the parking lot until dawn, watching the recording over and over. Councilman Braze, clear as day. She knew she couldn't go back to her apartment, but she had to see. She parked 2 blocks away and walked. Her apartment was a beacon. Smoke poured from the broken-out window. The front door was splintered, hanging off one hinge. They hadn't just searched for her. They had erased her. She turned and walked away, the numbness spreading. She was not just homeless. She was hunted. Her only thought was St. Jude's, the women's shelter on the other side of the river. The shelter smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. The women there looked at her with the same hollow eyes she felt in the mirror. She was given a cot in a room with 10 others. She didn't sleep. She sat, watching the door, her phone clutched in her bleeding hand. She saw them the next morning, 2 men in dark suits, scanning the street from a sedan across from the shelter. They weren't trying to be subtle. They were waiting. "You look like you've seen a ghost, child." Savannah jumped, an older woman, with kind eyes and a map of wrinkles on her face, sat next to her on the bench. Her name tag said Maria. "Worse," Savannah whispered. Her eyes fixed on the car. Maria followed her gaze. Her expression hardened. "Men like that," she said quietly, "they don't come here to donate." She looked at Savannah, a long, appraising look. "You're not a user. You're not a runaway wife. You're scared. That's a different kind of trouble. I don't know what to do." Maria reached into the pocket of her worn cardigan and pulled out a simple, thick business card. She pressed it into Savannah's hand, closing her fingers over it. "I don't know what you've seen, child, but if the law can't help you, or if the law is the problem, there's one man in this city who operates outside it." Savannah opened her hand. The card was black. On it, in simple, embossed silver letters, were 2 initials, DV. "He's not a saint," Maria warned, "but he answers prayers. Go to the address on the back. Tell them Maria sent you. Now go out the back, and don't stop running." Savannah didn't hesitate. She fled out the kitchen exit, past steaming vats of oatmeal and into the service alley. She spent the day in the public library, hiding in the history section, watching the exits. As evening fell, she knew she couldn't stay. The library was closing. The streets were dark. The rain started, a cold, driving Ravenport rain that turned the city lights into oily smears. She was soaked in 30 seconds. She had the card, but the address was in the hills, miles away. She'd have to take a bus, and she was terrified of being seen. She ducked into an alley to get out of the downpour, the same alley she'd used to get to the library. It was a dead end. Headlights swung into the narrow space, pinning her against the brick wall. It wasn't the police. It was the dark sedan from the shelter. 2 men climbed out, the same men from the chase. They smiled. Nowhere to run, little girl. Savannah's back hit the wall. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She looked for a weapon, a bottle, a brick, anything. There was nothing. The councilman just wants his phone back. Give it to us and we'll make it quick. They advanced. She braced herself, raising her hands. Then, a new set of headlights flooded the alley, brighter, higher. A low, throaty rumble of a powerful engine vibrated through the pavement. A black, armored-looking SUV, solid as a tank, had blocked the alley entrance. The 2 men froze, turning. The driver's door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a suit so black it seemed to absorb the light. The rain slicked his dark hair back, revealing sharp, imposing features. He did not see the 2 men. He looked at Savannah. His presence sucked the air out of the alley. The 2 goons took a nervous step back. "This is Vascari business," one of them stammered. "We're on behalf of Braze." The man in black didn't flinch. He just held his hand out. Not to them. To her. He said nothing. He just offered her a hand. Savannah looked at the 2 men who were going to kill her. Then she looked at the man who was offering her an escape she didn't understand. He was terrifying, but his eyes were steady. She pushed off the wall and ran, her sneakers splashing through the puddles. She didn't take his hand, but ran past him. The passenger door opened automatically. She scrambled inside. The man got back in the driver's seat. The goons were shouting now, one of them pulling a gun. The SUV didn't speed away. It moved. The engine roared, and the vehicle reversed out of the alley with a terrifying lack of urgency. The man with the gun didn't shoot. He just watched them go. The drive was silent for 20 minutes. Savannah was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, from the cold, from the fear. The SUV's interior was warm, silent, and smelled of rich leather and cedar. They left the city. Climbing into the dark hills of Ravenport, they passed through a massive wrought-iron gate that opened without a sound. The driveway was long, winding through a forest of pines. The house wasn't a palace, it was a fortress. Modern, all stone and glass, but it looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. He parked, and a man in a suit immediately opened her door, holding a large black umbrella. Inside, a fire was blazing in a fireplace that took up an entire wall. A towel and brandy. The man's voice was low, gravelly. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. A woman appeared, handed Savannah a thick, warm towel, and then the man a glass. He didn't drink it. He pressed it into Savannah's trembling hands. "Drink," she obeyed. The brandy burned a trail of warmth down her throat. Stopping the shivers, she stood dripping on a rug that probably cost more than her life. He stood by the fire, watching her. Damiano Vascari, the name clicked. The other boss, the one the papers whispered about but could never pin down. The one who owned the city's shadows, just as Braze owned its lights. "Councilman Braze," he said. It wasn't a question. Savannah nodded, clutching the glass. "He is my enemy," Damiano Vascari stated simply, "and the enemy of my enemy is a problem I can solve." He looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You recorded him. How did you know?" "Because he is turning my city upside down to find you. He would not do that if you were just a witness. He would do that if you had proof. They burned my apartment. I know. You're under my protection now," he said, as if stating a fact of nature, like gravity. "If you agree to trust me, I will take care of everything." "Trust you?" Her voice was a raw croak. I know who you are." A shadow of a smile touched his lips. "You know what the papers say. You don't know me, but you know Braze, and you know what he will do if he finds you." He took a step closer. He didn't loom. He just filled the space. I am the only man who can keep you alive tonight. Savannah Costa. The only question is, will you let me? She had nowhere else to go. She had no family. She had no future. She looked at this dangerous, silent man and gave the only answer she could. Yes, he nodded once. Mara will show you to your room. You are safe here. That night, she slept in a bed that felt like a cloud, in a room so silent it was deafening. The safety was disorienting. The adrenaline finally crashed, and the dreams came. She wasn't in the alley, she was a child, locked in the dark closet under the stairs, her aunt's lavender sachets making her sick. She was pounding on the door, but no sound came out. She was lost, she was afraid, and she was voiceless. Savannah woke to silence, not the silence of her car, which was always punctuated by distant sirens or the rumble of trucks, but a deep, velvet quiet that felt heavy as a blanket. Sunlight, thick and golden, streamed through a floor-to-ceiling window, illuminating a room that looked like a page from a magazine. The walls were a soft gray, the bed linens were impossibly white, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and old money. Her clothes from the night before, filthy, torn, and smelling of alley garbage, were gone, in their place. Folded neatly on a dark wood armchair was a set of clothes, soft black leggings, a thick cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal, and new-looking sneakers. There was no note. She showered in a bathroom carved from marble and chrome, the hot water stinging her skin, washing away the grime of the last several days. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel that felt like a hug, she found a breakfast tray on a low table by the window, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, coffee in a silver pot. A woman stood by the door, unmoving. Savannah startled, clutching the towel. The woman was tall, with dark hair pulled into a severe knot. She wore a black suit that fit her athletic frame perfectly, and an earpiece that looked like a piece of modern jewelry. "My name is Mara," the woman said. Her voice was flat, professional. "Mr. Vescari is handling business this morning. He will see you for dinner at 7. Who are you?" Savannah asked, her voice small. "I'm your bodyguard." The word was so absurd, so foreign, that Savannah almost laughed. "I don't need a bodyguard. I need—" She stopped. What did she need? A new life? A time machine? Mara's expression didn't change, but her eyes, a very pale blue, held a flicker of something, not pity, but understanding. "The clothes are for you. The food is for you. Your old phone is being cleaned. You will be given a new one." She gestured to the tray. "Eat. No one will bother you." Mara left, the door closing with a soft, expensive click. Savannah looked at the food, her stomach aching. It was an offering, a provision, but it felt like the first bar in a very beautiful cage. Yet, as she ate the eggs, the warmth spreading through her, she couldn't deny the feeling of profound, intoxicating safety. Dinner was a quiet, tense affair. The dining room was vast, with a table that could seat 30, but they sat at one small end, a single candle burning between them. Damiano wore a dark shirt, no tie. The sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong wrists and a glimpse of dark tattoos. He watched her as she ate, his dark eyes missing nothing. He didn't ask questions. He didn't talk small. He simply existed, a center of gravity in the quiet house. Finally, he set his wineglass down. "Your aunt, Delia, she cast you out. The engagement was to a man named Arthur Vance, a business associate of your uncle's with a fondness for young women and old brandy. You refused. She took your trust fund, your car, your name." Savannah's fork clattered onto her plate. It was not a question. It was a file report. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "It is my business to know things, especially about the people I am protecting." He leaned forward, the candlelight carving shadows under his sharp cheekbones. "Braze is my enemy. He deals in things I will not tolerate. Human trafficking, narcotics in the schools. He's a cancer in this city, and he hides behind a badge of public trust. The video you have is a weapon, but a weapon that cuts both ways." "You want the video," she said, her old defiance flickering. "That's what this is. This room, the food. Mara, I want the video," he agreed, his voice calm. "But I also want Braze gone, and I want the woman who is brave enough to record him to stay alive. Those three things are not mutually exclusive. He refilled her glass, his hand steady. You will stay here. You will be safe. And we will find a way to use that footage that does not end with your picture on the evening news. In the days that followed, Savannah began to understand Damiano's world. It was a kingdom built on contradictions. The house was silent, but always humming with unseen activity. Men in dark suits came and went, speaking in low voices, carrying briefcases. She saw Damiano conduct business once, from the landing above the main hall. He was speaking to a man who was pleading. Something about a shipment. Damiano's voice never rose. He was not angry. He was cold. He spoke a few words in Italian, and the man turned white. 2 of his guards escorted the man out. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly controlled. Mara, sensing her question, said quietly, Mr. Vascari does not tolerate failure, but he does not deal in drugs, and he does not deal in women. He has a code. Those who break it, or those who hurt the innocent, they answer to him, not to the police. He was a monster, Savannah thought, but he was a monster with rules, and in a world that had shown her nothing but chaos. His control was almost comforting. The spark happened on a warm evening. 2 weeks into her stay, the Ravenport chill had broken, and a spring warmth settled over the hills. Damiano found her on the main terrace, a vast stone expanse that overlooked the glittering, distant lights of the city. She was wrapped in a blanket, a glass of wine in her hand, watching the world she was no longer part of. He didn't say anything, just moved to stand beside her at the stone balustrade. He had his own glass. You're safe up here, he said, his voice a low rumble. It feels like I'm in a tower, she replied, not looking at him. Safe, but still a prisoner. Are you? He turned, leaning his hip against the stone, his body angled toward hers. Are you a prisoner, Savannah? It was the first time he had used her name without it sounding like an inventory item. I don't know what I am. The air between them changed. It thickened, charged with the unsaid things. He was close enough for her to smell the faint scent of his cologne, something like cedar and expensive soap, and the wine on his breath. You are a survivor, he said, his voice soft. He reached out, not to touch her, but to take a strand of her red hair that had escaped her braid. He rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger, his gaze locked on hers. You survived your family. You survived the dinner. You survived Braze. You are surviving me. Her breath caught. His gaze dropped to her mouth. She should have been terrified. This was the man who ordered hits, who ran the city's underbelly, but he was also the man who had given her a warm bed, who had fed her, who had not laid a single hand on her. He stepped closer, his body shielding her from the breeze. He set his wineglass on the ledge, his movements slow, deliberate. He placed one hand on the stone wall next to her head, caging her in, but his touch was light. Damiano, she whispered, but it wasn't a protest. He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers, a test. It was a spark, a shock of warmth. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the hard muscle, the steady beat of his heart. He took that as permission. He kissed her. It was not the bruising, desperate kiss she might have expected. It was deep and slow and searching. It was a kiss full of questions, and it tasted of expensive wine and a loneliness she recognized. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. It was a kiss that consumed the air, the city lights, the entire world. He deepened it, his mouth moving over hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Her fingers curled into his shirt. Then, just as the kiss was about to ignite, to break its banks and flood them both, he pulled back. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing heavy. His eyes were closed. Only if you want it, he whispered, his voice rough. He stepped back, giving her space. His hands dropping to his sides, Savannah was left shaking, her lips tingling, her body alive with a feeling she couldn't name. She stared at him, confused. Her aunt had demanded, her uncle had threatened, Sal had exploited it. Braze had hunted, this man, the most dangerous of them all, had asked. He wasn't forced. He hadn't manipulated. He had offered her a choice, and that, more than the kiss, terrified her. The next day, Mara drove her into a nondescript office building downtown. Mr. Vascari arranged this. A woman with a kind face and a soft voice, Dr. Alani, met her. It was a therapy session. Savannah sat for 20 minutes in silence, rigid with suspicion. "He can't make me talk," Savannah finally said. "He isn't—" "Doctor," Alani replied gently, "he is paying for my time. Whether you use it or not is up to you. This is your room, not his." And so, Savannah began to talk. She started with the diner, then the apartment. It was not until the third session that she spoke of her aunt, and in the fourth session, she finally cried for her parents, a grief she had been holding for 15 years. She left each time feeling raw and lighter, as if she were shedding an old, heavy skin. Damiano never asked what she spoke about. He just seemed to know when she returned. His gaze softer, his presence less imposing. He gave her a new phone, a sleek, encrypted device. Mara spent an afternoon showing her the estate's security systems. "There are panic buttons in every room," Mara explained, her tone practical. "The windows are bulletproof, but your best defense is not to be a target. Always assume someone is watching." One night, Savannah came down for a glass of water and found Damiano in the grand sitting room, a room she'd never seen him use. He was at the piano, a massive, gleaming black instrument. She paused in the doorway, but he had already seen her. He didn't stop playing. The melody was haunting. An old Italian song, full of sorrow and longing. He played with a surprising tenderness, his large, calloused hands moving gracefully over the keys. She drifted closer, drawn by the music. She sank onto the piano bench beside him, curling her feet up under her. She didn't speak. She just listened. The music wrapped around them, a private, shared language. When he finished, the silence that followed was just as intimate. She leaned her head against his shoulder. It was an impulsive, simple gesture, but it felt momentous. He tensed for a second, surprised, then relaxed. He didn't move. He didn't touch her. He just let her be. After a long moment, his hand found hers on the bench. He didn't grab it. He simply covered it, his skin warm and slightly rough against hers. His thumb stroked the back of her hand. Once. They sat like that for an hour, in the dark, his shoulder supporting her, his hand covering hers. It was more passionate, more profound than the kiss on the terrace. It was a promise of safety. It was solace. The next morning, the spell was broken. Damiano was in his study, a stark, modern room of steel and glass. Mara stood at attention. A man in a suit, a tech specialist, was packing up equipment. Damiano was holding her old, cracked phone. "The analysis is complete," he said, his voice all business. "The footage is clean," the tech specialist added, snapping his case shut. "No corruption, clear audio of Bray's, clear visual of the victim. It's solid, enough to send him away for life." A cold dread washed over Savannah, erasing the warmth of the previous night, the piano, the kiss, the therapy. It was all about this. "So you'll give it to the police," she said, her voice flat. "You'll leak it. My face will be everywhere." "The police cannot be trusted," Damiano said, his eyes hard. "Many of them are on Bray's payroll. And yes, if it were leaked, you would be exposed. Your name, your past. Bray's would be ruined, but his allies would hunt you for the rest of your life. So what? I'm just your prisoner forever? The girl with the video?" "No," he said, stepping out from behind his desk. He walked toward her, stopping just in front of her. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes intense. "You're right. As long as you are Savannah Costa, you are a target. You will always be looking over your shoulder. You will never be free." "What are you saying?" He took a breath. "I am saying there is a way to protect you, a way to erase your past completely, a way to make you untouchable, to give you a new identity so secure that no one, not Bray's, not your aunt, not anyone, can ever find you." "A new identity?" she said, hope and fear warring in her. "Like witness protection? More, better." He held her gaze. "My protection, my name. Braze would never dare to touch a Viscari. No one would. If you are my wife, you are invisible, you are erased, and you are safe. Savannah stared at him, the silence of the room roaring in her ears, the piano, the kiss, the quiet dinners. It had all been leading to this. "Marry me," Damiano Viscari said. The proposal hung in the air, cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "Marry me." Savannah's heart, which had been hammering with fear, seemed to stop altogether. "What?" she breathed, the word barely audible. "It is a transaction," Damiano said, his voice devoid of all the emotion she'd felt at the piano. He was back to being the boss, the strategist. "A marriage. It is the oldest form of alliance. If you are Savannah Costa, you are a witness, a target. If you are Savannah Viscari, you are my wife. You are me. To touch you is to declare war on me. Braze is a councilman, but he is not suicidal. Your past, your family, your name, it all gets buried." She took a step back, the marble floor cold beneath her feet. It was a trap. It was her aunt's house, all over again. A different cage, but a cage just the same. "You want to own me. You want to buy my silence, my evidence, by putting your name on me. I want to keep you alive," he countered, his voice hard. "I am offering you a fortress. Your choice is to accept it or to walk out of that gate and see how long you last on your own." He insisted it was her choice, but it felt like no choice at all. It was survival. She turned and walked out of the study, her footsteps echoing in the massive, silent house. She walked until she was outside, on the terrace, the night air cool against her hot face. She was staring at the glittering, indifferent city lights when Mara appeared beside her. The bodyguard was, as always, a silent presence until she chose not to be. "He is not your uncle," Mara said quietly. Savannah flinched. Turning to look at the woman, Mara's pale blue eyes were fixed on the horizon. "You think you know him?" Savannah shot back, her voice bitter. "I know what I know," Mara said, her tone flat. "I know that 10 years ago, there was someone else, a woman from his past, before he was this. He trusted her. He loved her, and she betrayed him. She sold information on a shipment to a rival for money, cost him 2 of his best men and almost his own life. He's never trusted a woman near his operations again. He's never asked anyone to wear his name. Until tonight." Mara turned to face her. "He's offering you his name. It is the only weapon he has that is stronger than a bullet. You should think about what that costs him." Mara left her, and Savannah was alone again, the information settling like a stone in her gut. This wasn't a proposal of love. It was a proposal of absolute mutual necessity. He was offering her the one thing he never shared, his trust, codified in a legal document. The next 2 days were a blur of transformation. Damiano received a message, a single, unfiltered piece of intel from his network. Braze was no longer being subtle. He had put a bounty on the street, $50,000 for the red-haired witness. "It's time," Damiano said, his face grim. He didn't send her out. He brought the world in. A woman, a stylist to the city's elite, arrived with a locked case. She worked in silence, her hands swift and professional, in the marble bathroom. Savannah watched in the mirror as her red hair, the last thing she owned from her old life, fell in clumps to the floor. The woman mixed a dye, the acrid smell filling the room when she was finished. Savannah stared at her own reflection. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her hair was a deep, soft black, the color of a raven's wing. It made her pale skin look like porcelain and her green eyes look shockingly bright. She was no longer Savannah Costa. She was someone else, someone harder. The transformation continued. Mara took her, not to the gym, but to a shooting range built into the stone sub-basement of the estate. The first time she held the gun, her hands shook so violently she dropped it. "Pick it up," Mara commanded, her voice void of sympathy. "Fear is what got you here. Do not let it be the thing that gets you killed." Savannah learned. She learned to stand, to breathe, to aim. She learned to control the recoil, the jolt that shuddered up her arm. The repetitive crack of the firearm was a new, violent rhythm. She learned to change her walk, to move with purpose, to check corners, to see reflections in windows. She was shedding her old self, the girl who slung hash, the girl who hid in trash bags. She was being remade, but with the steel came a new, cold anger. She was his weapon now, his pawn. She found him in the library, a room paneled in dark wood, the scent of old books and leather filling the air. He was reading, a pair of simple glasses perched on his nose, making him look, for a moment, like a scholar. "This stops," she said. He looked up, his gaze neutral. "What stops? This?" She gestured to her black hair, her new, rigid posture. "The training, the makeover. This is what my aunt did. She tried to mold me into someone I wasn't, someone who would be a suitable wife for a monster. You're doing the same thing. You're just using a different monster. You're turning me into a Viscari. You're turning me into you." He took off his glasses. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he looked tired. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet. "I am." The admission stunned her into silence. He stood up, walking to the fireplace. He stared into the low flames. "I am turning you into someone who can survive. The woman you were, she was brave, but she was soft. This world will tear soft things to pieces. I am giving you armor. If you see that as a cage, then you are not the woman I thought you were. And what if I don't want the armor?" she yelled, the tears she'd held back finally stinging her eyes. "What if I just want to be free? You say it's my choice. Is it? Or is it just marry me or die?" A muscle in his jaw clenched. He turned, his face a cold, impassive mask. "You want to leave?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "Fine. Go." He walked to his desk, pulled a key from a drawer, and tossed it onto the leather blotter. There was a black sedan in the garage, not one of my cars, a clean, untraceable vehicle. In the glove compartment, there was $10,000 in cash, a new set of papers, a burner phone, and a location for a safe house. "It's a cottage, 2 hours from here. I was preparing it in case you said no. You can go. You can be as safe as I can make you from a distance, but you will be alone. The choice is yours. It always has been." She stared at the key. It was a simple, silver key, an escape. She grabbed it. "I am not your property, Damiano. I have never treated you as such," he said, but his back was to her. He was already dismissed. That night, she couldn't sleep. The choice was a lead weight in her stomach. Stay and be his. Go and be hunted. She made her decision just after 2 a.m. She dressed in the black clothes Mara had given her, packed the few things she had, and walked down the stairs. Mara was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, as if she'd been expecting her. The bodyguard didn't move. She just watched as Savannah walked to the garage, her expression unreadable. The garage was filled with exotic, powerful cars. In the corner sat the black sedan. It was simple, anonymous, perfect. She got in. The key fit. The engine started. She backed out of the garage and drove down the long, winding drive. The gates opened for her. And then she was on the dark, mountain road. She was free. The feeling was not elated. It was a cold, sharp terror. She drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, following the address on the paper from the glove box. She was halfway down the mountain, about 30 minutes out, when she saw the glow. At first, she thought it was a wildfire, a bright orange light that flickered against the black pines, but this was too concentrated, too violent. It was in the valley, exactly where the safe house was supposed to be. She pulled over, her blood turning to ice. A plume of black smoke was rising into the night sky. The cottage wasn't just on fire, it was an inferno, an explosion, a bombing. He knew. Braze had known. He had known where Damiano's safe place was, the place he would send someone he wanted to hide. She was alone, she was free, and she was dead. She realized, in that moment, the terrible truth. Damiano's name wasn't a cage. It was the only shield on earth that could stop this. Being alone wasn't freedom, it was a death sentence. And she knew, with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty, that she trusted no one but him. She slammed the car into a spin, the tires screaming on the asphalt, and floored it. She raced back up the mountain, her heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm. She burst through the front doors of the estate, not caring if she woke the whole house. She found him where she'd left him, in the study, standing by the fire. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the mantel. He looked up as she stormed in, her face pale, smelling faintly of smoke. "The safe house," she panted. "It's gone. It's on fire." "He knew." Damiano nodded once, his face dark. "I know. The perimeter alarm went dead 10 minutes ago. I was just sending my men." She walked right up to him, until she was close enough to see the flicker of the fire reflected in his dark eyes. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "If I say yes," she said, her voice shaking but firm, "this isn't my aunt's house. You don't own me. I'm not your property. I'm not your pawn." She took a breath. "We walk side by side. Or this doesn't happen." He looked at her for a long moment, seeing the woman who had run into the night, the woman who had faced the fire, the woman who had returned. He saw the steel he had been looking for. A slow, small smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "Then marry me," he said, his voice a low, rough vow. "And be mine forever." He didn't wait for an answer. He took her hand and led her up the grand staircase, not to her guest room, but to his. His room was dark, masculine, and surprisingly simple. A large bed, a fireplace, a view of the mountains. He didn't turn on the lights. He just led her to the fire, which was burning low. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you sure?" She nodded, unable to speak. He unbraided her new black hair, his fingers surprisingly gentle, undoing the tight knots. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the single tear that escaped. "No more running," he whispered. He kissed her. It was not like the first, hesitant kiss on the terrace. This was a kiss of promise, of sealing a bargain. It was deep and raw and full of a terrible, beautiful possession. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. This was her choice, her one, true choice. His hands moved from her face to her shoulders, then down her back, pulling her flush against him. He was all hard muscle and controlled strength. He made her feel, for the first time in her life. Not small, but protected. He broke the kiss only to lift her, his arm under her legs, and carry her to the bed. He laid her down, his movements unhurried. The scene was bathed in the soft, flickering light of the fire. He didn't demand it. He didn't take it. He undressed her slowly, as if unwrapping something precious. He paused at the scars on her body, the one on her palm from the fence, a small, white line on her knee from a childhood fall. He kissed each one, his lips warm, his touch reverent, as if he were healing them. When she was bare, she felt no shame. He looked at her, his eyes dark with an emotion she couldn't name. It was hunger. Yes, but it was also something more. It was recognition. She reached for him, her hands fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. He helped her, shrugging it off. His chest was broad, covered in dark, curling hair, and on his left shoulder, she saw it, a stark black cross tattooed on his skin. She traced it with her finger, the symbol of faith on a man of sin. He watched her, his expression unreadable. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to it, a silent acceptance of all he was. His control snapped, a low sound, almost a groan, rumbled in his chest. He laid her back against the pillows, his body covering hers, his weight a comforting, solid presence. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, her shoulder, his touch electric, respectful and thorough. He made her feel safe. He made her feel cherished. He made her feel, for the first time, like she was truly seen. They came together not in a clash of passion, but in a slow, deep, emotional binding. It was the furthest thing from violence. It was a shelter. He held her, whispering things in Italian, words she didn't understand but whose meaning was clear in his touch. And for the first time since her parents died, Savannah Costa fell asleep in the arms of someone else and did not have a single nightmare. The marriage was the next night. There was no white dress, no flowers, no music. Savannah wore a simple black dress from the collection of clothes in her room. Damiano wore a dark suit, his face set in stone, a judge, a small, nervous man with sweat on his upper lip was brought to the library. By the light of a single candelabra on the desk, they stood. Mara and the housekeeper, Elena, were the witnesses. They stood in the shadows, their faces impassive. The judge read the vows, his voice trembling. It took less than 3 minutes. "I do," Damiano said, his voice a solid, unbreakable thing. "I do," Savannah replied, her own voice clear and steady. There was no ring. Instead, Damiano slid a thick envelope across the desk. She opened it. Inside was a passport, a driver's license, and a social security card. The face was hers. The woman with the black hair. The name was Savannah Vescari. "Sign," Damiano said, pointing to the marriage license. She took the pen, and with a steady hand she signed away her past. The ink was barely dry when the judge, his hands shaking, countersigned it and fled. Damiano Vescari picked up the document, blew on the ink, and folded it. He looked at her, the candlelight casting shadows across his face. "It is done," he said. "You are gone. Welcome home, Mrs. Vescari." Being Mrs. Vescari was not about love. It was about power. Savannah learned this on the first Tuesday of her new life. Damiano brought her into his study, a room she had previously only entered as an interloper. This time, she stood beside his desk as 3 men, his inner circle, his capos filed in. They were older, hard-looking men in expensive suits, and their eyes all flickered to her. The curiosity was palpable. "This is Savannah," Damiano said, his voice leaving no room for questions. "My wife. She is me." The 3 men who had probably killed him nodded as if he had just commented on the weather. "Mrs. Vescari," the oldest one said, dipping his head. The meeting began. They spoke of routes, of shipments, of the dockers' union. They spoke of a rival who had set up shop in a Vescari-controlled neighborhood. "He's family." One capo, Nico, said, "The Orsini, he won't move." Damiano listened, his hands steepled. He was perfectly still. Savannah watched him, fascinated by the cold, clear absence of emotion. He was not a man. He was a force. "Send him a message," Damiano said finally, his voice quiet. "One warning. Tell him to move. If he is still there by Friday, buy his building and burn it. If he is inside, that is his choice. Resolve it. Resolve it. Not kill him. Not send a message. Resolve it." The precision of the language was chilling. He was ordering a hit, or at least the very real possibility of one, with the same calm he'd used to order dinner. And Savannah, watching, felt a strange, cold comfort. This was the man who had promised to protect her. She was now on the inside of the fortress, watching him aim the cannons outward. Her public debut came 2 weeks later, the City Benefactors Gala, held at the Ravenport Museum of Art. It was the glittering jewel of the city's social calendar, an event where the old money and the new power mingled under a flag of charity. "You will need a dress," he'd said. And a dress had appeared. It was not a dress, it was a weapon. A gown of pure, deep emerald silk that clung to her new, stronger frame. The stylists, the ones who had dyed her hair, had shown her how to wear it, how to do her makeup to accent the sharp, dramatic change. When she descended the stairs, Damiano was waiting. He was in a tuxedo, looking less like a criminal and more like a king. He stopped, his hand on the banister, and for a fleeting second, his composure broke. His eyes traced her from her black hair to the pale column of her throat, to the way the silk pooled at her feet. He offered his arm. "They will look," he said, his voice a low growl. "Let them—" They entered the museum to a hush. The whispers followed them, a wave of sound parting before them. Savannah Vescari. Who was she? Where had she come from? She was too young, too beautiful, too unknown. Savannah kept her chin high, her hand light on his arm. She was not the girl from the diner. She was not the girl who slept in her car. She was the queen, and this was her court. She stood tall, meeting the curious, jealous, and fearful gazes with a cool neutrality. Councilman Braze was there, across the hall, holding a champagne flute. He saw them. He saw her. His smile, the slick, political smile, faltered. He didn't recognize her as the girl in the alley. He just saw Damiano Vescari with a new, beautiful, and very public wife. he saw a consolidation of power. And he looked, for the first time, afraid. Damiano leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his breath warm. "You wear it well," he whispered. "The dress? The name?" Behind the scenes, the war was already underway. Damiano was not a man who believed in a single front, while he presented his wife to the world. His legal fixer, a man she never saw, was quietly at work. "Leak the documents," Damiano ordered. One night in his study, the phone to his ear. "No, not the murder, not yet. The land deals, the kickbacks from the Port Authority. Give the feds something to chew on. Let them start pulling the thread. When they are deep enough, we will give them the rest." He was building a case, a street case, and a legal one. He was encircling Braze, cutting off his exits, all while Savannah learned to throw a punch. Her training with Mara intensified. It was no longer just about defense. It was about offense. Mara was a ruthless teacher. "You are small," Mara said, flipping Savannah onto the mat for the third time. "So you must be faster. You must be meaner. You must fight to cripple, not to win." Savannah learned to break holds, to use leverage, to find the weak points, the eyes, the throat, the knees. She worked until her muscles screamed and her body was a canvas of purple bruises. And with the pain came a new, sharp clarity. One afternoon, Damiano gave her a small, leather-bound book, a journal. "Doctor, Alani said you used to write," he said gruffly, as if embarrassed. That night, she opened it. The pages were blank, a future she hadn't expected to have. She picked up the pen and wrote, not about her past, but about her present. She wrote about the sound of the guards' feet on the gravel. She wrote about the taste of the expensive wine, and then, her hand steady, she wrote the name, Savannah Viscari. It was the first time it felt like hers, the first sign of healing. The healing brought new complications. The walls she had built were high, but Damiano was not a man who stormed castles. He simply walked in. She found him in the library late one night, a week after the gala. A fire was crackling, and he was reading a thick, leather-bound book, those reading glasses perched on his nose. A comfortable, domestic silence settled between them. She was on the sofa, her own book in her lap, but she was watching him over the pages. "I don't understand you," she said suddenly, the words breaking the quiet. He looked up, his eyes unreadable. "This," she gestured around the room, at the fire, the books, the safety, the doctor, the journal. "The way you are—" She shook her head, frustrated. This wasn't part of the deal. Kindness wasn't part of the deal. Protection, yes. A new name. But not this. He closed his book, setting it aside. "What do you want, Savannah?" "I want to know why." "You are my wife." "That's not an answer," she said, standing up, pacing. "I was a transaction, a witness you needed to control. I was a tool to use against Braze." "You were," he agreed, standing to face her. "At first, but you are no longer—" He was close, the heat from the fire warming his skin. She looked up at him, at this impossible, dangerous, and gentle man. "I'm terrified," she whispered, the admission costing her everything. His body tensed, the protector instantly alert. "Of Braze? Did he—" "No," she said, cutting him off. She put her hand on his chest, feeling his heart, a strong, steady beat beneath her palm. "I'm terrified of this, of you, of loving you." The word hung in the air, fragile and explosive. "I don't know how," she continued, the words tumbling out. "The last people I loved, my parents, they died. My aunt, she taught me that love is a weapon. I am terrified to love you, Damiano, because I don't know what it means, and I think it might destroy me." He didn't speak for a long moment. His dark eyes searched hers, and she saw a deep, aching vulnerability there, a reflection of her own. He lifted his hand, his touch infinitely gentle, and cupped her chin, tilting her face up to his. His thumb brushed her cheek, and his voice was a low, rough whisper. "Then be terrified with me." He kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, but of raw, shared confession. It was slow and deep and full of a quiet, desperate understanding. He was as lost as she was. That night, The nightmares came back. She woke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat. The closet. The lavender. Her aunt's cold, angry face. But this time, the door had opened, and Councilman Braze was there, his hands reaching for her. She sat up, her heart hammering, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "You are safe!" His voice came from the darkness. She looked, and he was there, sitting in the armchair in the corner of their bedroom. He was fully dressed, and he was simply watching her. "Damiano?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What time is it?" "It doesn't matter. You were dreaming." He came to the bed, the mattress dipping as he sat beside her. He didn't touch her, not right away. He just let his presence be a new anchor. "How long were you sitting there?" "Long enough," he said, his voice rough with a feeling she couldn't place. He finally reached out, his hand brushing the damp hair from her forehead. His touch was so careful, so tender. It broke her heart. He was watching her like she was made of glass, like he knew she could shatter, and he was the only thing holding her together. He was afraid. She realized, not of his enemies, but of this, of her. He held her as she cried, his large, strong body a shield against the ghosts. The peace lasted 3 days. Then, Braze sent his message. It was a normal morning. Savannah was in the kitchen having coffee when Mara entered, her face grim. "There's a package. It's been cleared, but it's addressed to Savannah Costa." A cold dread trickled down her spine. The name was a threat. It was a simple, elegant gift box, wrapped in white paper with a black ribbon. It had been left at the front gate. Damiano was in the hall, watching her, his face a mask. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, were photographs. 4 of them. They were her parents, a picnic. Years ago, her father, his arm around her mother, laughing, held a bouquet of wildflowers. They were the photos from her aunt's house, the ones Savannah had begged for and been denied, but they were defaced, cruel. Red ink was scrawled across them. Her mother's eyes were blacked out, her father's smiling mouth was stitched over with jagged lines, and at the bottom of the box, a small card, "You should have stayed buried, little girl." Savannah made a small, choked sound. The box fell from her hands, the photos scattering on the marble floor. She had never seen Damiano lose control. Not once. He was the eye of the storm, until now. A sound ripped from his throat, a low, animalistic roar of pure, undiluted rage. It was the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. "He touched her," Damiano said, each word a spike. He didn't just get angry. He erupted. He grabbed a priceless porcelain vase from a pedestal and smashed it against the wall. Shards flew. "Damiano," she cried, but he couldn't hear her. "I will kill him," he roared, his voice echoing in the massive hall. "I will tear his house down. I will burn his family from the earth." He was pacing, a caged tiger, his hands clenched, his entire body vibrating with a violence that sucked the air from the room. This was the man who ordered hits. This was the man who burned his enemies. Savannah's numbness shattered, replaced by a sudden, icy calm. She saw his rage, and she understood it, but she also saw the trap. "He wants this," she said, her voice quiet. Damiano didn't stop. He kicked over a chair, the wood splintering. "Damiano!" She said it louder, stronger. She walked into the center of his storm, planting herself in front of him. He was breathing hard, his eyes black with fury. She put her hands on his chest. He was shaking. "He wants you to rage," she said, her voice low and steady, forcing him to listen. "He wants you to be the monster everyone says you are. He wants you to come at him with guns, so he can be the victim, and you can be the mobster. He did this to break us, to make you do something stupid." He stared down at her, his jaw so tight it looked like it would break. He mocked. Her parents. "I know," she whispered, her own tears finally falling. "They are my parents, but this ends, and it ends with the truth, not war." He looked at her, his rage warring with the shock of her words, slowly, agonizingly. He unclenched his hands. He put his own over hers, his whole body still trembling. He leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "This ends with truth," he repeated, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Okay, truth." The next morning, the study was in a war room. The capos were there. Maps of Bray's hidden estate outside the city were on the table. Damiano was calm again, but it was a new calm, a deadly, final calm. "He's at the estate," Damiano said, his voice flat. "He thinks he's safe. We hit him tonight. Full strike, Nico. You take the east, Leo the west. No survivors. I want the house to be silent by dawn." "Yes, boss," Nico said, his eyes gleaming. "No." The word was quiet, but it cut through the room. Everyone turned. Savannah stood in the doorway. She was dressed in black tactical pants and a simple shirt. Her hair was tied back. "Savannah," Damiano said, his voice a warning, "this is not your concern. Go upstairs." "It is my only concern," she said, walking into the room, past the stunned capos, until she was standing at the head of the table, opposite her husband. She looked at the maps. "If you do this," she said, her voice clear, "you are just like him. You're just another monster fighting for territory. You'll spend the rest of your life cleaning up the mess, and he will die a martyr. The feds will stop pulling the thread on his crimes and start pulling it on yours." "He sent you photos of your dead parents," Damiano said through gritted teeth. "And I will be the one to make him pay for it." "Ah," she replied. She looked at him, her green eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen. "He's overconfident. He thinks I'm a terrified girl in an alley. He wants the video. He thinks it's the only thing that can hurt him." She leaned over the table, her hands flat. "So let me deliver it. Let me be the final blow." The message was sent through an anonymous encrypted channel. "The witness has the original footage. She is afraid. She will trade it for a new identity and $500,000 in cash. Tonight, midnight." Damiano's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice a low growl. Savannah stood in front of him, her face pale but set. She was wearing a simple black shirt, tactical pants, and the boots Mara had given her. "It's the only way. He's arrogant. He thinks I'm still the terrified girl in the alley. He'll come. He will come to kill you, Savannah, not to bargain." "That's why you'll be there," she replied simply. He hated this. He hated every part of it. He was a man of absolute control, and this, sending his wife as bait, was the antithesis of his entire existence. But he also saw the woman in front of him, the steel in her spine, and knew she was right. This was her fight. He ran his hands over her shoulders, checking the straps of the thin, bulletproof vest. His touch was clinical, but his fingers trembled, ever so slightly. He taped the small wire to her chest, his knuckles brushing the soft skin above her heart. "You will have a 20-man team in the shadows," he said, his voice rough. "Mara will be on the roof opposite, with a rifle. I will be in your ear, on this wire, listening to every breath. The second it changes, I am coming in. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. "He won't walk away from this, Damiano, and neither will I." The location was an abandoned art gallery in the warehouse district, a cavernous, dark space. Damiano had chosen it. It was a kill box, one way in, one way out. When Savannah walked in at 5 minutes to midnight, the place was silent. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of moonlight coming through a high, dirty skylight. Canvases in various states of decay were covered in white cloth, making them look like a legion of ghosts. Her footsteps echoed on the cracked marble floor. She stood in the center, as planned, and waited. At 2 minutes past midnight, the heavy front doors groaned open. Councilman Braze did not come alone. He was flanked by 2 men, mountains in dark suits, their hands in their pockets. Braze himself looked different from the gala. He was not the smiling politician. He was the man from the alley. His eyes were cold, his suit immaculate. "The little red-haired witness," he sneered, his voice echoing in the vast room. "You've been a very, very busy girl." "Hello, Councilman," Savannah said, her voice surprisingly steady. The small earpiece crackled with Damiano's breathing. He was listening. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, And you got smart, black hair. I'll admit, I didn't recognize you at the gala. But my men, they have a way of remembering a face. I have the video, Savannah said, cutting him off. The footage, it's on a drive. The money first. Braze laughed, a short, ugly sound. The money? You think this is a transaction? He took a step closer, his men fanning out slightly, cutting off her angles. You really are stupid. I came here, sweetheart, for the drive, and to finish the job my men started in that alley. You won't get the drive if you kill me, she said, her heart hammering, but her voice cold. It's not on me. It's in a safe. If I'm not back in 1 hour, it gets released to every news outlet in this city, and to the feds. This gave him pause. His smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Savannah said, taking a small step back. You came here to kill a witness. You didn't come here to commit political suicide. Braze looked at her, his eyes narrowing. He saw her, really saw her, the steady gaze, the way she stood, balanced, not cowering. You've changed, he whispered, a flicker of unease in his eyes. You're not the same girl. No, she said. I'm not. It doesn't matter, he snarled, his patience snapping. He nodded to his men. Get the drive. One of the men lunged. Savannah didn't wait. She moved. Just as Mara had taught her. She didn't try to fight the larger man. She used his momentum, twisting, driving her elbow into his solar plexus. He grunted, folding, Braze, enraged, grabbed her. You bitch! His hands were on her throat, squeezing just as she had dreamed. The world began to gray at the edges, the lack of air a sudden, sharp panic. Fight to cripple, not to win. She didn't claw at his hands. She drove her thumb into the soft spot under his jaw, pressing the nerve. He howled, his grip loosening. She didn't stop. She brought her knee up, hard, into his groin. Braze crumpled, gurgling, his face a mask of shock and pain. She stepped back, panting, the wire digging into her chest. The two men were back up. The one she had hit was furious. The other one was already pulling his gun. This was it. This was the moment. Now, Damiano! She screamed into the wire. The main doors didn't just open. They exploded inward, blown off their hinges by a concussive force. Damiano was there, a black silhouette against the sudden flood of headlights. He was not alone. He was flanked by Nico and 3 other men, all armed, all moving with a terrifying, professional grace. Gun! One of Braze's men shouted, raising his weapon. It was over in 2 seconds. The gallery lit up with muzzle flashes. The sound was deafening, a series of sharp, contained cracks. It was not a chaotic firefight. It was an execution. Damiano's team fired, and Braze's 2 men fell, their unfired shots burying themselves in the marble floor. Silence descended, thick and smelling of cordite. Braze was on the ground, holding his throat, his eyes wide with terror. Damiano stalked toward him, his face a cold mask of pure, controlled fury. He raised his weapon, his aim steady, pointed directly between Braze's eyes. "Damiano, no!" Savannah shouted. "We do this my way. The truth, you promised." Damiano's finger was tight on the trigger. He looked at the man who had defaced her parents' photos, who had tried to kill her twice. "He doesn't deserve the truth," he growled. "I do," she said, her voice raw. "I deserve to be finished with this. Don't make this a street war. Don't make him a martyr." As if summoned, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens, not the local police, but the wail of federal agents. Bright blue and red lights flooded the gallery, washing out the shadows. Men in dark blue windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back swarmed the room, their weapons raised. "Councilman Braze," the lead agent, a tall man with a grim face, shouted, "You are under arrest!" Braze, his face a mask of disbelief, stared at the agents. You can't. I'm a city official." "Not anymore," the agent said, pulling Braze to his feet and slamming him against a dust-covered statue. "We have a wiretap of you conspiring to meet a witness. We have the anonymous tip about your offshore accounts, which, it turns out, are full of money from narcotics trafficking, the pincer movement, Damiano's legal fixer. And," the agent said, nodding to Savannah, "we have her." Braze was cuffed, his face a mottled, ugly red. He looked at Savannah as they led him out. "You're dead," he spat. "You hear me? You're dead." Savannah just watched him, her expression calm. One of the agents, a woman, approached her. "Mrs. Vescari, we need you to come downtown and give a full statement." Damiano stepped out of the shadows, his weapon gone, his jacket immaculate. He slid his arm around Savannah's waist, pulling her against his side. "My wife is in shock," he said, his voice pure, cold authority. "She will give her full, cooperating statement tomorrow, at our home, with our lawyer present." The agent looked at him, at the power he radiated, and nodded once. "Tomorrow?" Damiano didn't wait. He guided Savannah out of the gallery, past the federal agents and the flashing lights, into the armored SUV. The public scandal was an explosion. Councilman arrested in midnight sting. Braze indicted on federal racketeering charges. The city was in an uproar. The trial became national news, and through it all, Savannah's name was never mentioned. She was a protected witness, a confidential informant, the woman who brought down a tyrant. Her old life, Savannah Costa, was buried, and Savannah Vescari had never been there at all. Her name was cleared, anonymously and absolutely. Back at the Vescari estate, they retreated. The house was put on lockdown. No visitors, no business. There were only them. That night, a fire crackled in the bedroom. The world outside, the sirens and the news trucks, felt 1,000,000 miles away. Damiano sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. She came out of the bathroom, her skin scrubbed clean, wearing one of his soft, black t-shirts. He didn't turn. She came up behind him, her hands gentle on his shoulders. He was coiled tight, a spring wound to the breaking point. "It's over," she whispered, her hands kneading the hard muscle. "I almost lost you," he said, his voice thick, raw. "When I heard him touch you, when I heard you scream for me, I wanted to kill everyone. The feds, his men, him, myself. But you didn't," she said, turning him to face her. She sat on his lap, her arms winding around his neck, her legs on either side of him. "You waited. You trusted me. I don't know how to do this, Savannah," he confessed, his face buried in her hair, his arms wrapped around her waist like a drowning man. "This feeling, this fear, it's too much." "Then we'll be afraid together," she said. She kissed him. It was not a kiss of victory. It was a kiss of healing. It was slow and deep and full of a quiet intensity that spoke of shared trauma, shared survival, and a new, fragile beginning. He made love to her with a reverence that bordered on worship, his touches slow, his kisses deep. It was not a fire, it was a slow, melting warmth. He held her face in his hands, his eyes locked on hers, as if he were memorizing her. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the firelight playing over their skin. "When I saw him in handcuffs," she confessed, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing the cross on his shoulder, "I thought I would feel happy or powerful, but I just felt empty. The revenge. It didn't fix anything." She looked up at him. "I don't want to be that person anymore. Damiano, the girl in the alley, the woman in the gallery. I don't want revenge. I just want peace." He held her, his hand stroking her black hair. "You have my entire world, Savannah. Whatever peace you want, I will build it for you. I will burn down anyone who tries to take it from you." He was quiet for a long time. Then he got up. "Damiano?" He walked to his dresser, his back to her. He opened a drawer and took out a small, dark velvet box. He came back to the bed, his face unreadable in the dim light. "The first time," he said, his voice rough, "was a transaction. It was to protect you. It was to give you my name. It was practical." He sat in front of her, his gaze unwavering. This is not practical." He opened the box. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a ring. It was not a gaudy show of wealth. It was an emerald-cut diamond, so clear and bright it seemed to drink the firelight. It was flanked by 2 smaller stones, a design of simple, breathtaking, and timeless elegance. "Savannah," he said, his voice thick, "I've loved you for too long not to. From the moment you walked into that gallery, knowing you were walking into the fire, I knew you are not my weakness, Savannah. You are my goddamn heart. He took her hand. The first was to protect you. This one is because I love you. He didn't ask her to marry him. She was already his wife. Damiano, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Will you stay? He asked. Not as my prisoner, not as my witness, but as my wife, as my equal. Will you stay with me? She held out her left hand, her fingers trembling. I had nothing before you. Now I have you, and I have myself. I'm already yours. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect, solid, and beautiful fit. But the story was not over. Miles away, on a high, cold rooftop overlooking the city, a man lowered a high-powered spotting scope. He had been watching the gallery, a long-range surveillance job. He wasn't one of Braze's. He was something else, something older. He'd seen the entire exchange, the feds, the bust. He'd seen Vascari, his oldest enemy, the man who had taken everything from him, emerge with a woman, a new woman. He snapped a long-lens photo. Damiano, his arm around his new, black-haired wife, his face full of a protective fury the watcher had never seen. The man, his face a map of old scars, smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. So, he whispered to the cold night air, the lion has a weakness. After all, he has a heart. He looked at the photo. And now, I know exactly where to aim. The villa sat on a cliff overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea, a whitewashed fortress of solitude surrounded by lemon groves and ancient olive trees. 6 months had passed since the gallery, since the flashing lights and the federal agents. 6 months after Savannah Costa had ceased to exist and Savannah Vascari had truly begun. Here, the air smelled of salt and wild rosemary. The silence was not the heavy, terrifying silence of the closet under the stairs, nor the tense, loaded silence of the estate in Ravenport. It was a living silence, filled with the hum of bees and the distant crash of waves against the rocks. They lived under new names. To the locals in the small village down the winding road, they were simply Signor and Signora Rossi, a wealthy, private couple who tipped well and kept to themselves. Savannah stood on the terrace, a paintbrush in her hand. She had taken over the sunroom, turning it into a studio. The canvas in front of her was a chaotic, beautiful mix of blues and greens, the sea, the sky, the storm she had survived. She wasn't painting to escape anymore. She was painting to remember. Below her, in the terraced garden, Damiano was on his knees in the dirt. The man who had commanded armies of enforcers, who had ordered hits with a nod, was now carefully pruning a rosebush. He wore a linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos on his forearms. He looked younger here, the perpetual furrow between his brows smoothed by the sun and the sea. He sensed her watching him. He always did. He looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun, and smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. "Is the light good?" he called up to her. "Perfect," she called back. Later that afternoon, they cooked together in the large, rustic kitchen. It had become their ritual. Damiano taught her how to make pasta from scratch, his large hands guiding hers as they kneaded the dough. There were no servants here, no guards in the hallway, just them. "You are pushing too hard," he murmured, his chest pressed against her back, his hands over hers on the flour-dusted counter. "It is not a fight, Kara. It is a conversation. You have to listen to the dough." Savannah leaned back into him, closing her eyes. "I'm used to fighting." "I know." He kissed the side of her neck. "But the war is over. You can be gentle now." The peace was seductive. It felt permanent, but the world had a way of finding cracks in even the highest walls. The letter arrived the next morning. It came through the secure courier Damiano used for his remaining business interests, forwarded through 3 different countries. It was addressed to Savannah Costa. Savannah sat at the iron table on the patio, the envelope heavy in her hand. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Spidery, elegant and sharp. Aunt Delia. She opened it. "Savannah, I do not know if this will reach you." The lawyers say you are gone, that you are part of some program, but I know you are out there. You must help us. The scandal with Braze, it touched us. The investigations went deep. Uncle Vance is being indicted. They froze the accounts. They are taking the house. We have nothing. We are ruined. You owe us. We took you in when no one else would. You are family. Please. It went on for 2 pages, a litany of complaints and demands, guilt weaponized in every sentence. Damiano walked out, carrying 2 espressos. He saw the letter, and his face went still. He set the cups down and sat opposite her. Delia, he said. She says they're losing everything. Savannah said, her voice void of emotion. She says I owe her. Damiano waited. He didn't offer to fix it. He didn't offer to send money. He let her choose. Savannah looked at the desperate, scratching handwriting of the woman who had locked her in closets, who had tried to sell her to an old man, who had thrown her onto the street like garbage. She remembered the cold. She remembered the hunger. She picked up the gold lighter that lay on the table, the one Damiano used for his occasional cigar. She flicked it open. I have a family, Savannah said quietly. She looked at Damiano. It's sitting right in front of me. She lit the corner of the letter. They watched in silence as the paper curled and blackened, the flames eating the guilt, the obligation, and the past. She dropped the burning remnants into the ashtray and watched until it was nothing but ash. Let's go to the market, she said, standing up. We need fresh basil. The market in the nearest city was a vibrant, chaotic maze of stalls, smelling of fish, spices, and expensive leather. Savannah loved it. She loved the noise, the life, the anonymity. She was browsing a rack of silk scarves, running her fingers over the fabric, while Damiano was a few stalls down, buying wine from a merchant he knew. She felt the presence before she saw it, a shift in the air. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, a reflex honed in the alleys of Ravenport. Signora, she turned. 2 men stood there. They didn't look like the local fishermen or tourists. They wore heavy jackets despite the heat, and their eyes were hard, professional. Come with us, quietly, the taller one said in English. He stepped closer, and she saw the glint of a knife tucked into his belt. The car is just around the corner. It was the watcher, the loose end Damiano had worried about. Savannah didn't freeze. The old Savannah would have paralyzed with fear. But the woman who stood there now had been trained by Mara. She'd been forged in fire. I don't think so, she said calmly. The man reached for her arm. Savannah moved. She didn't pull away. She stepped in. She stomped hard on his instep, shattering the small bones in his foot. As he gasped, she drove the heel of her palm upward, slamming it into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. The second man lunged. Savannah grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from the stall's display and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the side of his head, shattering on impact. He went down hard. She didn't wait to see if they got up. She turned and ran, weaving through the crowd. Damiano! He was already moving. He had seen the commotion. He cut through the crowd like a shark through water, his face a mask of terrifying focus. He reached her, grabbing her arm, pulling her behind him. Are you hurt? He demanded, scanning the crowd, his hand hovering near the small of his back where she knew he carried a weapon. No. 2 men. English speakers. They tried to take me. We have to go. Now. They made it to the car, a fast, nondescript sedan. Damiano drove with a cold precision, checking the mirrors constantly. They weren't being followed, but the illusion was shattered. The bubble had popped. Back at the villa, the gates were locked, the security system fully armed. Damiano was on the phone, speaking in rapid, low Italian. He hung up and turned to her. It is Thorne, he said, his voice grim. Lucien Thorne, an old enemy. He was a rival of my father's. I thought he was dead or retired. He was the one watching the gallery. He wants to use you to get to me, to finish what he started 20 years ago. We can run, Savannah said, though the words tasted like ash. We can move again. No, Damiano said, shaking his head. If we run forever. He knows we are here. He will follow. There is no peace as long as he breathes. Then what do we do? Damiano looked at her. and she saw the old Vescari in his eyes, the strategist, the predator. We stopped running. We invited him in. The plan was a gamble. A high-stakes game of poker played with lives. Thorn was a collector of rare artifacts, a man of ego. Damiano used his contacts to set up a trap, a fake, exclusive auction for a stolen Renaissance painting held at a private estate near the border. Rumors were planted that Damiano Vescari would be there to bid. Thorn wouldn't be able to resist. He would come to take the painting and to take the head of his enemy. 3 days later, they were at the estate. It was a black tie affair, filled with the corrupt elite of Europe. Savannah wore a gold mask that covered the upper half of her face and a gown of shimmering blue. She held Damiano's hand. His grip was iron hard. "He is here," Damiano whispered, not moving his lips. Across the room, a man with silver hair and a face scarred by fire was watching them. Lucian Thorn. He smiled, raising a glass of champagne. He thought he had walked into a den of sheep. He approached them, his confidence radiating off him like heat. "Damiano," Thorn said, his voice like grinding stones, "you look, domesticated, and this must be the famous wife, the one who brought down Braze." "Thorn," Damiano nodded, "I see you are still alive. A disappointment." "I am a patient man," Thorn said, his eyes sliding to Savannah. "I waited for you to get comfortable, to get soft, and now I will take everything you built." He snapped his fingers. 4 men materialized from the crowd, surrounding them. "This ends now," Thorn smiled. "Outside. The car is waiting." Savannah stepped forward. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't afraid. She looked Thorn in the eye through her mask. "You're right," she said clearly. "It ends now." She squeezed Damiano's hand. That was the signal. The lights in the ballroom were cut out. Pitch blackness, in the dark. Chaos erupted, but it wasn't the chaos Thorn expected. Damiano's old allies, many had called in from the shadows of his past, were already in the room, disguised as waiters, as guests. There was no gunfire, just the sounds of struggle, of bodies hitting the floor, of muffled shouts. When the emergency lights flickered on 10 seconds later, Thorn's men were gone. The room was empty of guests, who had been ushered out by security. Thorn stood alone in the center of the room, and surrounding him were 12 men, their weapons drawn and leveled at his chest. Damiano stepped forward, removing his mask. "You mistook peace for weakness. Lucian, a fatal error." Thorn looked around, his face pale. "You can't kill me here. There are witnesses." "I'm not going to kill you," Damiano said calmly. "That would be too quick and too messy." He gestured to the shadows. 2 large men stepped forward, carrying zip ties and a black hood. "There is a site," Damiano said, his voice conversational. "Off the books, no government runs it. No records exist. It is a hole in the earth. You are going there. You will not have a trial. You will not have a lawyer. You will simply cease to occur." Thorn screamed as they grabbed him, a sound of pure, primal terror. They hooded him, silencing his cries, and dragged him out the back exit. Just like that, the threat was gone, not fought, not warred with, removed. They drove back to the villa in silence, the adrenaline slowly fading, leaving behind a deep, exhausting relief. When they arrived, the moon was high over the water. They didn't go inside. They walked down the stone steps to the private beach, the sand cool beneath their shoes. Damiano took off his jacket, tossing it onto the rocks. He turned to Savannah, pulling her into his arms. He held her tight, burying his face in her neck, breathing her in. "It is done," he whispered. "Truly done." He pulled back to look at her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the love that softened the darkness in his eyes. "There will always be danger, Savannah," he said seriously. "The world is a violent place. Men like Thorn, men like Braze, they will always exist." He stroked her cheek with his thumb. "But there will always be me, standing between you and them, always." Savannah covered his hand with hers. She thought of the girl in the diner, the girl sleeping in the car, the girl who thought she was worthless. That girl was a stranger now. "I had nothing before you," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I was a ghost. Now I have you. And I have myself." She smiled, a fierce, proud thing. "That's everything. That is more than enough." He looked at her, stunned by her strength, by the beauty of her resilience. "Come here," he growled softly. He didn't kiss her. He turned and walked straight into the water. "Damiano!" she laughed, shocked. "Your shoes. Forget the shoes." He waded in until the water was at his waist. Fully clothed, he turned and held out his hands. Savannah didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels and ran into the surf, the water warm and shocking against her skin. She splashed through the waves, her dress soaking through, heavy and clinging, until she reached him. She jumped into his arms, wrapping her legs around his waist. He caught her easily, spinning her around, the water flying in silver arcs around them. They were laughing. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Two damaged souls, forged in trauma, who had found a way to build a fortress of happiness. He stopped spinning and looked at her, his hair wet, water dripping from his eyelashes. The laughter faded into a smile of profound tenderness. They kissed. It was a kiss of salt and sea and freedom. It was the seal on their future. The darkness was behind them. The horizon was wide open. The final image was quiet. It was morning. The sun was just cresting over the olive trees, painting the kitchen in stripes of gold and amber. Savannah was barefoot, wearing one of Damiano's white shirts that hung to her mid-thigh. Her hair was messy, a black halo around her face. She was standing at the stove, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. She hummed a soft tune, the same Italian melody he had played on the piano all those months ago. Damiano entered the room quietly. He didn't startle her. She knew his step. She knew his rhythm. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his eyes closed, breathing in the scent of coffee and his wife. She leaned back into him, covering his hands with hers. They stood there for a long time, watching the steam rise from the pot, watching the sun climb the sky. There were no guns on the table. There were no enemies at the gate. There was just this moment. Peace. Earned. Not given. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Savannah and Damiano, from the cold alleys of Ravenport to the warm shores of their new life. It has been a pleasure bringing this tale of danger, resilience, and love to you. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow from all over the world, and if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia romance stories for more intense, emotional, and passionate tales. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments. Did you suspect the Watcher in the shadows? Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in love.